Providence Municipal Court, mid-morning. The room breathes with a specific kind of humidity, a mix of damp raincoats and anxious expectation. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, a low drone that competes with the sound of the air conditioning rattling in the vent. On the wooden benches, the citizens of Providence wait their turn. It is a tapestry of the everyday, a nurse in blue scrubs rubbing sleep from her eyes after a night shift, a contractor with drywall dust settled in the creases of his work boots, an elderly woman clutching a rosary and a parking ticket with equal tightness. The court clerk calls names with a rhythmic, practiced cadence, moving the morning along like a well-oiled machine. At the bench, Judge Frank Caprio is in the middle of a dialogue. He isn't just processing paper, he is listening. A young man stands before him, explaining a lapsed registration, his voice trembling slightly. Judge Caprio leans forward, elbows on the mahogany, his face arranged in an expression of patient curiosity. "Help me understand," he says softly, the microphone catching the warmth in his voice. He is building a bridge of empathy, turning a cold legal proceeding into a conversation about hardship and second chances. The room is quiet, respectful of the exchange. Then the atmosphere shatters. The heavy double doors at the rear of the courtroom don't just open. They are thrown wide, hitting the stops with a dull, reverberating thud that makes the nurse jump. The rhythm of the court is severed instantly. Heads turn, expecting an emergency, but instead they see a performance. Ethan Thorne steps over the threshold. He is 20-something, the son of the governor, and he enters the room as if he owns the mortgage on the building. He is dressed not for court, but for a brunch he is already late for. His jeans are distressed designer denim, artfully torn and costing more than the fines being levied today. A branded T-shirt clings to him, and on his left wrist, a massive gold chronograph watch catches the overhead light, sending a sharp glint across the room. But it is his hands that tell the real story. He isn't holding paperwork or a citation. He is holding a smartphone, held high at chest level. He is typing, a lazy, arrogant smile playing on his lips as he chuckles at a text message, completely oblivious, or perhaps intentionally indifferent, to the solemnity of the venue. He doesn't hurry to a seat. He drifts down the center aisle, the rubber of his expensive sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. He treats the courtroom like a theater lobby during intermission. The contrast is violent. The weary mother counting coins in her purse versus this golden boy checking his social media feed. Judge Caprio's pen stops moving. The scratch of ink on paper ceases. He looks up, peering over the rim of his glasses. His gaze bypasses the nervous defendant at the podium and locks onto the figure in the aisle. The judge's face remains calm, but his eyes narrow with a specific, piercing intelligence. He sees the posture, the phone, the complete lack of deference. In a courtroom built on the fragile currency of mutual respect, Ethan Thorne has just walked in with a counterfeit attitude. Caprio doesn't speak yet, but the silence he allows to stretch out is louder than a gavel strike. The air thickens, charged with the electricity of an inevitable collision between entitlement and the law. The court clerk stands, her posture rigid against the worn wood of her station. She is the keeper of the record, and today the record is long. She adjusts her glasses, her face a mask of professional indifference, refusing to acknowledge the celebrity aura Ethan Thorne is trying to project. "Docket item 7B, she announces, her voice cutting through the low murmur of the gallery. October 26th, 3:30 p.m. Main Street, Providence. She reads the location like a coordinate on a map of hazards. Charge 1. Operating a vehicle at 45 miles per hour in a posted 25-mile-per-hour zone. The numbers hang in the air, heavy and indisputable. She continues without a breath. Citation includes a notation for dangerous maneuvering in the vicinity of a pedestrian crosswalk. Officer remarks indicate an immediate hazard to foot traffic. Ethan Thorne listens to the list of his transgressions as if they are menu items he has no intention of ordering. He stands in the center of the well, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his designer jeans, rocking slightly on the heels of his limited edition sneakers. There is a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, a smirk that suggests this entire proceeding is a tedious interruption to his afternoon. He shakes his head slightly, a micro-gesture of dismissal, treating the allegations of endangering pedestrians as trivial exaggerations. The clerk flips a page, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Charge 2, October 26th, 3:40 p.m. 10 minutes later. She looks up briefly, then back down. Illegal parking in a federally designated handicap zone located at Sweet Dreams Bakery. Vehicle was positioned to block the wheelchair ramp and main entrance in violation of city ordinance and ADA regulations. The accusation lingers. Blocking a bakery entrance. Blocking the disabled. In the back of the room, a few heads shake in disapproval. The air in the courtroom grows tighter, the patience of the public wearing thin. But Ethan remains untouched by the atmosphere. He inspects the cuff of his shirt, his body language screaming that he is simply waiting for the bill. Judge Frank Caprio has not looked down at the paperwork. His eyes have been fixed on Ethan since the young man sauntered through the gate. Caprio has sat on this bench for decades. He knows the difference between nervousness and arrogance. He sees the slouch, the wandering eyes, the complete absence of contrition. The judge lets the silence stretch, forcing Ethan to look up, forcing him to acknowledge the man in the black robe. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Caprio says finally. His tone is level, devoid of anger, but stripped of any warmth. It is the voice of the institution. "I am looking at you, and I am looking at these charges." The judge leans forward, his hands clasped on the mahogany desk. "You are standing there with a smile. You seem very relaxed." Caprio pauses, letting the observation sink in. "Do you understand the seriousness of these charges? We are talking about safety. We are talking about the rights of people who cannot walk as easily as you do. These actions have real consequences for other people. Do you grasp that?" Ethan Thorne leans his elbows on the podium, the posture of a man ordering a drink at a country club rather than facing a magistrate. The mahogany rail, worn smooth by the nervous palms of thousands of Providence residents before him, seems beneath his touch. He offers a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. A practiced, camera-ready expression, bright and hollow. "Your Honor," he begins, his voice smooth, lacking the tremolo of the usual defendants in this room. "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here. The officer? Zealous, perhaps? I had an incredibly urgent meeting downtown. Crucial timing for the city, really. The signage on Main Street is frankly ambiguous at best." He waves a manicured hand dismissively, as if the painted curbs and metal posts were mere suggestions, open to interpretation by those with important places to be. The courtroom air is thick, the hum of the ventilation system the only sound competing with Ethan's confidence. In the back row, the veteran with the pin on his cap shifts in his seat, boots scraping the linoleum, but Ethan ignores him. He is focused entirely on the judge, expecting a nod, a shared understanding between men of status. "You see," Ethan continues, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone, leaning in as if to share a secret, "I was running late for, well, let's just say family business. My father—" He pauses there, the word hanging in the stale air. He straightens his spine, chest puffing out slightly, the name governor sitting on the tip of his tongue, like a heavy gold coin ready to be dropped to tip the scales. But Judge Frank Caprio does not nod. He does not smile. He sits high on the bench, framed by the flags, his face a mask of absolute unyielding patience. Behind his glasses, his eyes narrow, not with anger, but with a piercing clarity that strips away the designer suit, the expensive watch, and the entitlement. It is a look that says, "I know exactly who you are, and I do not care." Ethan catches that gaze and freezes. The sentence dies in his throat. The air in the room seems to drop a few degrees. The silence stretches, uncomfortable and heavy, until Ethan clears his throat, his confidence flickering like a dying bulb in a storm. He shifts his weight, suddenly finding the scuffed floor tiles fascinating. It was just a confusion, Ethan finishes lamely, retreating from the brink of the name drop, sensing the ice beneath his feet. Honestly, Your Honor, these are just minor infractions. Technicalities, really. I'm happy to pay whatever administrative fee is necessary to clear the docket and save the court's time. He tries to reduce the law to a transaction, a receipt to be crumpled and tossed away, reaching for his wallet as if this were a checkout line. Judge Caprio leans forward. The movement is slight, but it commands the entire room. The scratching of the clerk's pen stops abruptly. "Mr. Thorne," Caprio says, his voice low but resonating off the wood paneling, cutting through Ethan's attempted charm like a knife through silk. "You call them technicalities. You speak of confusion." The judge pauses, letting the weight of the words settle on Ethan's shoulders, heavy as lead. "But in this chamber, we do not barter with public safety." Ethan opens his mouth to interrupt, to offer another slick explanation about his schedule, but Caprio holds up a hand. Palm out. A stop sign far more effective than the one Ethan ignored on Main Street. "Let me be very clear," the judge says, his tone hardening, stripping away the grandfatherly warmth to reveal the iron of the judiciary beneath. "You may have appointments. You may have urgent business. But when you enter this city, you enter a contract with every other citizen to follow the rules that keep them safe." Caprio locks eyes with the young man, his expression unreadable but his message unmistakable. "The law is the same for everyone, Mr. Thorne, and no one, absolutely no one, stands above it." "Is there anyone present to be heard on this matter?" Judge Caprio asks. His voice isn't loud, but it carries a weight that cuts through the ambient hum of the ventilation. He scans the gallery, his gaze bypassing the expensive suit of the defendant, to find the truth sitting in the wooden pews. Movement in the third row. A woman rises. Maria Rodriguez. She doesn't carry herself with the practiced, slouching ease of Ethan Thorne. She carries the weight of a double shift. She wears a heavy winter coat over a work apron that still bears faint dustings of flour. White ghosts on dark fabric. Her hands, resting on the barrier as she approaches the bench, are red from heat and hard water. She looks tired, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that a single night's sleep cannot fix, but her jaw is set like stone. "State your name for the record," the judge says gently, his pen hovering over the docket. "Maria Rodriguez, Your Honor, owner of Sweet Dreams Bakery on Main Street." Her voice is quiet at first, trembling slightly, then it finds its footing. "I'm the one who called the police." Ethan Thorne sighs, a theatrical exhale meant to signal boredom, shifting his weight on his designer sneakers. He looks at the ceiling, refusing to make eye contact with the woman whose day he ruined. "Tell me what happened," Caprio says, ignoring the boy's theatrics and focusing entirely on the baker. "It's not just a parking ticket to me, Judge," Maria says. She clutches a worn leather purse, her knuckles white. "My delivery van was boxed in. Completely. I honked. I waited. The driver wasn't there." She gestures vaguely toward Ethan. "That loading zone is vital. I had a 4 p.m. delivery scheduled for the children's wing at the city hospital. Custom pastries, fresh cream fillings, temperature sensitive." The courtroom is silent now. The shuffling of papers stops. The clerk looks up. "Because I couldn't move the van and the engine overheated waiting in that traffic, the cooling unit failed. $300 of inventory ruined. But it's not the money, Your Honor." She pauses, looking down at her hands, fighting the wobble in her voice. It was for the sick kids. They were waiting for a treat. I had to call and cancel. That's a contract breach. That hurts my business. But breaking a promise to children in a hospital ward? That hurts my soul. Ethan's hand moves to his pocket, perhaps to check his phone out of habit, but he stops. He feels the eyes of the room, the bailiff, the veteran in the back, the mother in the front row, boring into him. The air in the room grows heavier. There is more, Maria adds, her voice hardening, gaining the steel of someone protecting their own. Money I can lose. Lives I cannot. Judge Caprio nods slowly, leaning forward, his hands clasped on the desk. Go on, Ms. Rodriguez. Mrs. O'Connor. She is 82 years old. She comes in every Tuesday for a plain bagel. She uses a walker, the heavy kind with the tennis balls on the legs to help it slide. She moves slow, Judge. Very slow. Maria takes a breath, steadying herself against the memory. She was stepping off the curb just as this machine, flew out of the spot. No signal, no look, just gas. Maria turns to look directly at Ethan for the first time, her eyes flashing. He didn't see her because he wasn't looking. He missed her walker by inches. The wind from his car nearly knocked her over. She stood there shaking in the middle of the street until I ran out to get her. She was too terrified to walk home. I had to close the shop early just to drive her. Judge Caprio sits back, the leather of his chair creaking in the silence. The gravity of the testimony settles on the room like dust. He looks at the defendant. Ethan isn't smirking anymore. The urgent meeting excuse evaporates in the face of spoiled treats for sick children and a terrified grandmother. He shifts his feet, looking at the floor, the confident facade showing its first hairline fracture. The reality of his entitlement has just been billed, and the cost is higher than a parking fine. Judge Caprio doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He simply nods to the clerk, a gesture so small it barely disturbs the stale air of the courtroom. Yet the atmosphere shifts instantly. The overhead lights seem to dim as the large projection screen descends, humming with a mechanical finality that sounds like a closing cell door. The white canvas flickers to life, grainy at first, static dancing across the surface before sharpening into the grayscale reality of Main Street, frozen at 3:30 p.m. Ethan Thorne shifts his weight from one expensive sneaker to the other, the leather creaking softly in the quiet. His earlier confidence, once worn like armor, starts to fray at the edges. He glances at the screen, then quickly away, but there is nowhere to hide. On the screen, the timestamp ticks forward, seconds dripping away with agonizing slowness until a blur enters the frame. It's a black sports car, low to the ground and moving with a violence that jars against the silent, respectful hum of the municipal court. The engine's roar is absent, stripped away by the mute surveillance feed, but the speed is palpable, a dark streak tearing down the center line, ignoring the rhythm of the city and the safety of its people. Then, the collective gasp. It comes from the back row, from a mother holding a toddler, but it echoes in everyone's chest. On screen, an elderly figure, Mrs. O'Connor, recognizable instantly by the fragile, slow cadence of her walker, steps tentatively off the curb. The black car doesn't slow gradually. It lurches, brake lights flaring white in the monochrome feed like camera flashes. The vehicle swerves, tires likely screeching in a sound the video cannot reproduce, but which everyone imagines, missing the woman by mere inches. She recoils, a sudden terrified jerk, stumbling back onto the safety of the sidewalk, clutching her chest as the wind of the passing machine whips her coat. The car doesn't pause. It doesn't stop to check. It corrects its course with an arrogant jerk and slides directly into the hashed blue lines of the handicapped zone, the nose of the vehicle effectively barricading the entrance to Sweet Dreams Bakery. The driver's door opens, but the video cuts there, leaving the image of the obstruction burned into the retina of every person in the room. In the courtroom, the silence is heavy, suffocating, thicker than the humidity outside. Ethan Thorne is no longer looking at the judge. He isn't checking his watch or smoothing his designer t-shirt. His gaze is fixed intently on the scuffed floor tiles, his neck flushing a deep, betraying crimson that rises past his collar. The projection freezes on the image of his car, parked with entitled precision, while the elderly woman on screen leans against a lamppost for support, a ghost of the danger he dismissed. The misunderstanding he claimed moments ago dissolves under the harsh, unblinking light of evidence. Judge Caprio watches the screen for a long moment, letting the image sink in before turning his gaze slowly back to the young man. The truth hangs in the air, absolute, undeniable, and far heavier than any fine. The projector screen flickers once, then fades to black, leaving the stark reality of the courtroom to rush back in. The hum of the equipment dies down, replaced by a silence so heavy it feels like it has mass, pressing against the wood paneling and the rows of spectators. It isn't the quiet of respect. It is the suffocating stillness that follows the public dismantling of a lie. Ethan Thorne, who minutes ago stood with the relaxed posture of a man waiting for a table at a high-end restaurant, now looks as though the floor has dropped out from under his Italian leather soles. The video didn't just show a traffic violation, it showed a character flaw, broadcast in high definition for the room to dissect. The color drains from Ethan's face, turning the confident flush of the governor's son into a sickly, waxen gray. That practiced, magazine-ready smile, the one he used to charm hostesses and dismiss officers, has evaporated, leaving his mouth slightly open, a jarred door to an empty room. He shifts his weight, but there is nowhere to stand that feels steady. His hands, previously tucked casually in his pockets or gesturing with entitlement, now hang uselessly at his sides, fingers twitching against the fabric of his designer jeans. He looks toward the gallery, perhaps seeking an ally or a nod of reassurance, but finds only the cold, unblinking stares of strangers who just watched him endanger a grandmother for the sake of convenience. Even Maria Rodriguez, seated a few rows back, offers no words. Her vindication is silent, absolute, and cuts deeper than any shout could. Judge Frank Caprio does not speak immediately. He lets the silence do the work. He sits back in his high-backed chair, removing his glasses with a slow, deliberate movement that echoes like a gavel strike in the quiet room. He places them on the bench, folding the arms one over the other, and looks at Ethan. There is no anger in the judge's eyes, no fire and brimstone. Instead, there is a profound, weary disappointment, the look of a grandfather watching a child break a promise. It is a gaze that strips away the title, the net worth, and the political connections, seeing only the young man standing there, stripped of his defenses. Ethan tries to speak. His lips part, forming the beginning of a syllable, perhaps another excuse or a plea, but the sound dies in his throat. The urgent meeting he claimed is now revealed as a lie. The misunderstanding is exposed as arrogance. The script he had written for this interaction, where he charms the old judge and walks away with a warning, has been burned. For the first time in his life, the invisible armor of his last name has failed. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. In this room, under these lights, he is not the governor's son. He is just a defendant who nearly hurt a neighbor. Judge Caprio's silence stretches, a vast expanse that Ethan must cross alone, forcing him to sit with the uncomfortable truth of who he was in that video. The silence in the courtroom has a texture now, thick and granular, like the dust dancing in the shafts of light hitting the defense table. The projector screen fades to blue, then black, but the image of the black sports car swerving remains burned into the retina of every person in the room. Ethan Thorne stands at the podium, stripped of his earlier armor. The designer hoodie, the heavy watch, the posture of a man who owns the pavement. It all looks suddenly costume-like, ill-fitting. He stares at the wood grain of the table, his hands gripping the edges as if the floor might tilt. Judge Frank Caprio does not raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He leans forward, elbows on the bench, hands clasped in a steeple of contemplation. The only sound is the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, counting seconds that Ethan can no longer outrun. "Mr. Thorne," Caprio says, the name landing with a dull thud. "You entered this chamber under the impression that your biography was a defense. You believed that who you are outweighs what you did." The judge pauses, looking over his glasses, his eyes scanning Ethan not as a defendant, but as a puzzle missing a piece. But the law is the great equalizer. It does not bend for a surname. It does not break for a bank account. Ethan swallows hard, the sound audible in the stillness. "You treated the safety of this city as an inconvenience," Caprio continues, his voice smooth but cutting deep. "You nearly struck Mrs. O'Connor. You destroyed Ms. Rodriguez's livelihood for the afternoon, and you did it with a smile." Caprio shakes his head slowly, a gesture of profound disappointment rather than rage. "True stature, young man, isn't measured by the car you drive or the influence you leverage. It is measured by your capacity to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is measured by service." The judge picks up his pen. It hovers over the docket, a sword of Damocles. "I could fine you, but a fine is just a fee for you, isn't it? A transaction." Caprio shakes his head. "No, we are going to trade in a different currency today. Time and humility." The pen scratches across the paper, loud and definitive. 100 hours of community service. But not just anywhere. You will report to the nursing home where Ms. Rodriguez was delivering her goods. You will serve the very people you endangered. You will clear tables. You will listen to their stories. And you will understand the fragility of the lives you rushed past. Ethan looks up, eyes wide, the realization sinking in. Caprio isn't finished. Additionally, you will write an essay, 2,000 words, on the civic responsibility of privilege. And before you leave these premises, you will write a personal letter of apology to Mrs. O'Connor. Handwritten. I want you to feel the effort in your wrist. The judge closes the file, the sound echoing like a gavel strike. "We don't build character by letting you buy your way out of the hole you dug. You want to be a leader? Start by learning how to serve." The mandate from Judge Caprio wasn't just a legal formality, it was a complete relocation of reality. The Providence Senior Care Center operates on a different frequency than the high-speed lanes of Main Street. It smells of industrial lemon polish, boiled vegetables, and the dust of long afternoons. Ethan Thorne arrives for his first shift, wearing a polo shirt that costs more than the facility's weekly grocery budget, his sneakers blindingly white against the scuffed linoleum. He holds the mop handle with a pained delicacy, staring at the gray water in the bucket as if it were toxic waste. For the first dozen hours, he is a tourist in the land of service, stiff, resentful, checking his Rolex every 4 minutes, mentally calculating how quickly he can buy his way out of this discomfort. He serves lunch trays with the enthusiasm of a prisoner, averting his eyes from the residents, terrified that the mundane, fragile reality of aging might somehow tarnish his image. But the architecture of Caprio's sentence is designed to outlast the initial wall of ego. The repetition wears him down. By hour 30, the designer logos disappear, replaced by a plain, sweat-stained gray t-shirt. The tasks stop being punishments and settle into necessary rhythms. The turning point isn't dramatic, it's quiet. He is assigned to assist Mr. Henderson in room 304, a man with paper-thin skin and a wheelchair decorated with a faded infantry patch from Korea. Henderson struggles to adjust his footrest. Ethan sighs, kneels to fix it, and his hand brushes the cold steel. Henderson starts talking, not about politics or who Ethan's father is, but about a frozen hill in 1951, about the noise of mortars and the terrible silence of snow. Ethan stops. The mop dries unnoticed in the corner. He looks up, really looks, into eyes that have seen the end of the world. The arrogance that usually acts as Ethan's shield begins to fracture under the weight of these stories. He sees the trembling hands of Mrs. O'Connor trying to open a milk carton, hands that once perhaps held a gavel or a newborn, and he reaches out to help without waiting for applause. The grimace of the first day softens into a look of genuine furrowed focus. He isn't checking the clock anymore. The ticking on the wall becomes irrelevant compared to the timeline of the lives in front of him. He is learning the specific gravity of a human life, realizing that the city doesn't run on influence or horsepower, but on the quiet, unglamorous friction of people helping people. The boy who walked into court demanding respect is slowly fading away. In the reflection of the hallway window, a man who understands how to earn it is taking his first real breath. Winter has settled over Providence. The radiators in the municipal court clank and hiss, fighting the draft from the hallway. The benches are full, wet umbrellas, tired eyes, the endless shuffle of citations. When the clerk reads the name Ethan Thorne, the room doesn't brace for impact like last time. There is no designer hoodie, no flash of a heavy watch, no smirk telegraphing immunity. Ethan walks to the podium wearing a simple charcoal sweater and pressed slacks. He stands with his hands clasped behind his back, waiting for the judge to acknowledge him. The silence he holds now isn't defiance, it's patience. Judge Caprio flips through the file, the pages crisp under the microphone light. He sees the completion letter from the nursing home director, the handwritten essay stapled to the back. He looks up, peering over the rim of his glasses. He remembers the prince who walked in months ago, expecting the world to bend, but the face looking back is different. The jaw is set, the eyes clear. "Mr. Thorne," Caprio says, his voice low and steady, 100 hours. That's a lot of weekends." "It was, Your Honor," Ethan replies. He doesn't lean on the podium. But it wasn't enough. The judge raises an eyebrow. "Explain?" "I went there thinking it was punishment," Ethan says, addressing the bench but speaking to the room. "I was angry. Then I met Mrs. O'Connor again. She didn't recognize me at first. I helped her with her meals. I listened to stories from people who built this city while I was just driving over it." Ethan pauses, shifting slightly, looking at his hands. "I learned that respect isn't something you inherit, Judge. It's something you rent every day with how you treat people. I was overdue on my payments." A quiet murmur ripples through the gallery. This isn't the script people expect. Judge Caprio lets the words hang in the air, nodding slowly. This is why he sits on the bench. Not for the fines, but for the moments when the coin drops. "You know, Ethan," Caprio says, leaning forward, "a lot of people come through those doors with excuses. They blame the signs, the cops, the weather. You blamed yourself. That takes courage." The judge takes his pen, the instrument of judgment, and circles the bottom line. "We don't keep a debt on the books when the lesson has been learned. The remaining fines are dismissed. You're free to go." "Thank you, Judge Caprio," Ethan says. The gratitude is raw. "Good luck to you, son," Caprio says, smiling, a real grandfatherly warmth that lights up the monitors. "And Ethan, drive carefully." Ethan turns. He walks down the center aisle, not as a VIP, but as a citizen. At the exit, he stops, holding the heavy wooden door open for a mother struggling with a stroller, waiting until she is safe inside before stepping out into the gray afternoon. Judge Caprio watches the door close, then turns to his clerk. "Next case," he says, the rhythm of the court resuming, but the air in the room feels just a little bit lighter.